Let me start with that point, just for clarity. Are you still donating to the Tory Party, and is it contingent on a specific path for Brexit?
No, I don't think my donations in the past to the Conservative Party have been contingent on Brexit. I was a supporter of David Cameron, as you know, and we had a difference of view on Brexit. I think that's true within the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. I think the essential point is that the Conservative Party, broadly speaking, the supporters, I would say more than 60%, probably two-thirds of Conservative Party supporters actually voted for Brexit. So I would say a significant majority of people who've supported Conservatives are Brexit supporters.
And Howard, do you think that the Conservative Party survives what is being thrown at it at the moment? And I ask this because I've heard some on the Brexit side of the party suggest that if there were to be a delay, if Article 50 was suspended, then perhaps they'd be so incensed that this would be something that would tear the party apart. Does it look like a party that could fall apart?
Look, it's survived a couple of hundred years. So history tells us it's likely to survive for very significantly longer into the future. If you're a betting man, you'd have to say it's going to survive for a long time into the future. Nothing's certain in politics.
How concerned are you, Howard, about a hard Brexit, the possibility of a hard Brexit, and about the possibility of a hard border in Ireland?
Look, I think I'm sitting here in Berlin. I was in Bonn yesterday. I hear the German friends and business colleagues talk about Brexit almost as much as we do in the UK. And I think they're equally concerned. And I think there's a big impetus throughout Europe now, people realizing that there's a risk of a deal not being agreed. There's a big impetus to find a compromise and a solution. And I think that the EU, together with the Conservative government, will find a fudge. It wouldn't be the deal that I would have set out to do in the first place, but I think they will find a compromise. It will be a fudge. It will be a solution. It kind of kicks the can down the road because they still haven't agreed a trade deal. I would never have agreed to pay money until I knew what the trade deal was, and I don't think you can have an Irish solution until you know what the trade deal are. Of course, we're all concerned about Ireland, but I do think there are solutions, and I think it's been put up as an obstacle unnecessarily, and there are solutions if all sides are sensible.
So you think there will be a fudge on the backstop, and you think there will be an agreement by March 29th?
I think that there'll be some impetus between now and March 29th such that people will be confident enough to either agree or have a 3-month delay in which they document the agreement, and at some point over the coming months there'll be a fudge.
Howard, post-Brexit, how close do you want the city to stay to regulation in the EU with regards to financial services? And I ask this because, of course, you set up Shore Capital back in the 1980s, a period of big change for UK financial services. The UK went one way, other parts of Europe were still doing something else. So how close to the EU do you want financial services to remain, or not at all?
Well, I think the government's had completely the wrong approach on this. If I do business from Shore Capital in the US, I have to comply with SEC regulations. But when I'm not doing business in the US, the rest of the time, we don't have to comply with SEC regulations. I believe that if we're doing business in Europe, we need to have an alignment. But if we're not doing business in Europe, we shouldn't have to comply with the EU rules in order to continue doing business in Europe on other occasions. So the government should have adopted a tougher approach and said, listen, we have a massive trade deficit. If you want to continue to have free access to our markets, we want proper access for our services to your markets. When we're trading in Europe, yes, we'll comply by EU rules, but when we're not trading in Europe, why should we have to comply by your rules?
Are there advantages, Howard, that you think investors that Shore Capital can see in Brexit? Are there assets that have been mispriced that you think are fit to move?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the UK is massively underperformed major markets, particularly the US. The economy has remained relatively strong. Obviously, it's weakened over the last year or two, but it's still growing and has had one of the fastest growth rates of any G7 country since the financial crisis. So financial assets, property assets, have underperformed because of the uncertainty. I should say the uncertainty is not just about Brexit and the outcome of Brexit, which I think many people, experienced people, are quite sanguine about. They're far more fearful about what if Jeremy Corbyn got into government. And I think if people were convinced that Corbyn's chances of getting into government were very low, then you would see a very strong performance in the markets. But at the moment, people are very concerned about that. The second point I'd make is that even if I'm right, and there is a fudge and there is a deal over the coming months, we still haven't sorted out a trade deal. And so we'll have that continued uncertainty. Will we be able to settle a trade deal? So I just think the whole thing's been mishandled. We should have combined a discussion about money, Ireland and trade. It should have all been settled by now. The government were too slow and we're having unnecessary continued uncertainty. That will continue.
Okay.
But the big fear is what happens with Labour.